So let's quickly review that again. A very weird squat jump, is not agree.
Discussion 4.
My first thing is, remember, a squat jump is a closed chain activity. Right?
Okay.
An open chain activity, like throwing a ball, it starts off as this closed chain in the mid-A, probably call it closed chain. But like throwing a ball, right, a clearly open chain, where remember we've talked about transference angular momentum from large pieces of mass to small pieces of mass. Okay, and each limb, each joint can flex or extend independently of any other limbs, right? In an open chain, I can do this without affecting my elbow. This is a closed chain activity initially where your feet are on the floor. So you're not going to see that transverse momentum across segments sequentially as easily. Because, for example, let's pretend, I mean, obviously you want to get the body as high as you can, right? And so that the body is a larger piece of mass than the ankles, the shank, and the thigh. So in other words, we're going opposite way. Okay, but could you, if you wanted to, extend the ankle, and then extend the knee, and then extend the hip? Because that's what, if you want to actually transfer momentum from segment to segment, that's what you do. You know, shoulder, elbow, wrist, whatever, ball. You can't do that here, can you? If I go down, if I now plantar flex to push off, what happens to my knee? My knee is going to extend. The hip is linked to the knee. The knee is linked to the ankle. So what you see here is a coupled extension. Okay, to transfer the energies through this system, you want to. So the initial thing to do, of course, is to go down, right? Whoops, what happened there? Pause this. So he's going to squat down. Okay, so this is storing, is this potential or kinetic energy? Potential. Potential energy is any by virtue of its position, isn't it? Okay, so if I put a high ball in and drop it, lifting up here is giving it potential energy. Speed down, potential. So you're storing energy in tendons and soft tissues. Okay, put on free stretch, and then you're going to explode upwards using plantar flexion, knee extension, and hip extension. Okay? Now, this is not a very good jump, to be honest, because what this jump is, I've seen jump before. This is not a non-functional jump, should I say? He is not jumping for height. This is what you do if you go to your fitness gyms, right? Maybe you've seen me do this. This is what you'll do at CrossFit. So this jump is for exercise, not to get height. He's doing it to get a burn in his quads and in his butt. That's what these kind of exercises do. And you know, repeated, right? Over and over and over again. So his arms aren't really working very well to get himself off the ground hard. Okay? This is more to land, to do repeated jumps over and over again to get a burn in the quads and a burn in his butt and whatever. Okay? So if you were going to really use your arms better to gain height, what would you do? Exactly. You'd go up here, wouldn't you? Okay? Because what you want to do to keep jumping in a high situation, going for height, is to transfer momentum from the arms. I mean, the arms are pretty small compared to the body. But it's all of these joints have to hit maximum extension at the same time. You can get quite a bit of height, or not a bit of height, but you get a bit of height from your arms. If you time the arm extension or flexion, at the appropriate time. All right, try this here. This is a good stand up. Wake yourself up. Right, this is what we're going to do. You're going to stand flat on the ground. You're not going to use your legs at all. You're going to have your arms here. And you're going to go as fast as you possibly can up here and stop them about here. As fast as you can. You feel your feet coming off the ground. Can you get your feet off the ground? Like, throw yourself really, really fast. As hard as you possibly can. Can you feel a little upward kind of motion? All right, sit down. I thought that much clearer, right? But the only way you can use that in a real situation, if I was in a squat jump and I did this and went and then jumped, it's just stupid, wouldn't it? Or if I jump in midair, as I'm in midair, I go like that. Would that do any good? No. Equal opposite reaction, my body would go down as much as my arms would go up. So the key to getting a good height is to time that extension at the maximum part just as you take off. So all those joints you hit extension at the same time, and your arm should be going up exactly and stopping, and then you're going to lift yourself or help lift yourself off the ground. Don't make any sense. I'll prove my point. Maybe. Here is a proper jump. This is a bloke, world record box jump. You see those who try and jump as high as you can up in a box? This is a bloke from Canada, I can't remember his name. Look at the height of that.
Oh my gosh.
And watch how he uses his arms and he. Hang on, get rid of that sound. So watch how far he goes down. So apply as much force over as much long distance as possible. He's doing about 5 foot. What is it? 5 foot 10.
Wow.
That is how you transfer momentum using your arms at the last second. Or even a better one. This is the combine. Folks, Byron Jones. You've got the world record standing board jump. So watch that. You see how his arms are coming into it? Time his arms exactly the same time he's driving his feet. You get that effect. That is very different from obviously doing that squat jump exercise. Same there, another one. Now you could do another one straight away, like the other guy was doing lots and lots and lots of them. Does that make sense? So again, jumping is a learned skill. You get better. If you're not timing the arm and the leg and the knee and the plantar flexion all at exactly the correct time, you won't get as much height. Does that make any sense? All right, questions? No? All right, so we're going to talk about muscle dynamics, and hopefully quite a bit of this, I know I said it before, with the review, we've all had exercise physiology, correct? And quite a few have done biomechanics, all had exercise phys, right? So let me, I'll go fairly quickly through some of it, slow down on other parts, let me know if I'm going too quick on a certain part, if this is completely new to you. So these are various things that connect and influence a muscle's ability to do movement, to do force, whatever. And we as physical therapists need to know about all of this. If you incorporate these, and some of these can be a problem for not allowing movement to occur. So we're going to quickly go through some of these. Very briefly, you've all seen this before, right? Here's somebody's muscle chopped out of the body and sitting down here. And there's various parts to it, right? You've seen it before. You have the whole muscle body surrounded by the epimysium. It's broken into these fascicles, right? You've seen it before. Each fascicle is separated by the endomysium, and then you've got the actual muscle fiber here, and muscle cell. Yes, you've all seen that, and that's surrounded by the perimysium, endomysium, epimysium. These layers of connective tissue may hold these fibers in place, right? But they also give us some elasticity to the muscle. We'll talk about in a second. And of course, if you look at the individual muscle cell or muscle fiber, you'll see it's broken into these myofibrils, right? Nothing new to you, right? And within those myofibrils, that single myofibril within this muscle cell is made up of these contractile proteins, myosin and actin, right? All seen that before? Nothing new there, right? Nothing familiar. And you've got the myosin fiber, the protein with the myosin head on it. I just did this one instead of an actin one, but you've seen this before. And the way you get this sliding muscle filament theory, remember, is those myosin filaments, or those little bridges or oars, grab hold of the actin filament and row it past. So up in a ball, you know, kind of grab hold, hinge, and pull. So they all slide together. Okay, so you see this effect here. Changing the sarcomere from the Z to Z line or Z to Z line is the sarcomere, right? And as those blue myosin proteins grab hold of the actin, those red lines, they pull the red lines inwards, and the Z lines get close together, and that's what you get, muscle contraction, right? That's nothing new. So the key thing to remember about this, I'm sure you've heard before, is the amount of force a muscle can make is directly proportional to the number of cross bridges that are attached. The more those cross bridges are attached, they're grabbing hold of an actin filament, the stronger or more force the muscle is going to make at a given time. Okay? So if you reduce the cross bridges, force drops. So that leads us, so in this situation here, the top diagram, this can make less force than this, because these cross bridges here are hanging out in space, they're not attached to the actin molecule. Fair enough? And if a muscle gets too short, the myofilaments bump into filaments on the other side of the sarcomere and dislodge cross bridges. So as you get very short, you get interference between these filaments and the muscle force drops again. So that suggests that there's an optimal position length of the muscle to make force. Too short, too long, there's less force. Okay, fair enough? And that leads us to, have you seen this kind of graph before? Have you seen this length-tension relationship it's called? This is your length-tension relationship for muscle fiber itself. Okay? The actual contractile components. You can actually never produce it because you have to take out the passive component. You can't take out the passive component. If you took it out of a muscle, you just be gel. Right? Anyway, so this shows that at short lengths, less muscle force, at medium lengths, the most force, and at long lengths, there's no force. It's inverted U shape, and it shows here. It's an optimal length at which you get most force out. And that is, as this diagram shows, you can see here, for example, looking at the biceps femoris or eccentric radius brevis, you can see how at certain lengths you can make the muscle too long to make a lot of force, or you can make it too short to make a lot of force. So, for example, you're doing a bicep pull-up. You're coming up here, it's quite easy, and now you're getting the last few degrees, and you're really struggling because the muscle force is very low. It's very hard to make any force when the cross bridges are too tight, as it were, banging into each other. And if you look at that, not showing, this is given in terms of sarcomere length, but if you were to plot it as percent of resting length, you would see this kind of form, this kind of shape, and lo and behold, this being 100%. So the most force a muscle can make, muscle fibers, the active component, is at about 100% of resting length. Theoretically, there's no force below 50%, but most of it really, around about 70%, most research suggests, once you get less than 70%, maybe 60% of its resting length, it's pretty much shot. There's not much more force you can make. Maybe down, some research shows maybe down to 50%. Out past here, 150, that's the absolute limit, usually it's less than that, but about 150% of resting length, all across bridges are free floating. You pull the thing so far apart, no cross bridges can make any force. So here, again, very hard to make force actively with the muscle's contractile components. Okay? So, given a muscle can make virtually no force less than around about 70, but let's say 50 to 150, that situation, if a muscle is held in a very shortened position, or a contract to a very short position, it's very hard to make any muscle force. That gives us what's known as the term active insufficiency. You've heard that term before. Is that exercise clear or not? Some say yes, some say no. More yeses than no's. So people say no, got it, right? So, for example, this is a good technique, a good theoretical construct to remember where somebody attacks you with a knife. So, okay, try this example. You're going to make a fist as hard as you possibly can with your wrist extended. Okay? I can hold a knife very strongly if somebody attacks me like that. Alright, now straighten your fingers, relax them, and flex you as hard as you possibly can. Flex you as hard as you possibly can. Now make a fist with your fingers. So, right? It's very hard to hold onto a knife if your hand is flexed. That's because your finger flexors cross the wrist, cross the metacarpal joint, cross all those carpal joints, cross the IP joints, etc. If you flex this, you're taking up a lot of the shortening capacity of the muscle already, not letting me have much left my fingers. So if somebody attacks you with a knife, you grab the wrist and you bend the wrist, and the knife will drop out. Okay, that's what you didn't want either way. Okay? So that is actually the difference when a two joint or a multi-articular joint does not have enough shortening capacity to cause a complete range of motion in all those joints at the same time. I can finger flex, I can wrist flex, I can do blah blah whatever, but do more at once. The muscle is down here. It's just got not, there's nowhere for it to go. So it's very hard to make any force to bend the length. Hard, easy to hold a knife here, it's hard to hold a knife here. Does that make sense? So that's it. This graph shows the active component or the contractile component of a muscle. But remember, we have all those soft tissue things in there, the perimycin, endomycin, etc., that actually hold those fibers together. The elastic components. The elastic components within and at the ends of muscle. They're called the parallel elastic components, the series elastic components. You can model it like this spring, or engineering model, a spring, a series elastic end at the end of the muscle fibers, and these parallel elastic components within, alongside those muscle fibers. Have you heard of these terms before? No. Okay. So the rest so far you've had. So I'll move a little slow here. So these are passive elastic components actually within or at the end of the muscle, the tendons, the nerves, perimycin, epimycin, endomycin. This is like a spring, a bungee cord, a therotubing. You've got therotubing lying in the muscle itself and at the end of the muscle. If I stretch a therotube out, it generates force, it resists me, it gives force, right? So we have to account for this. This is in a muscle too. These elastic components are part of a muscle. We can't just get them out of there and look at the active by itself. So if we look at just the passive components by itself, basically look at a dead muscle, there's no nerve to it, and then stretch it. So we get somebody chops somebody's biceps out their body, slap them on a table, and measure its length, and measure the force, and then stretch it a bit. Measure a length, see how much force. Measure its length, see how much force. Right? It's like a bit of third tube. Switch it out, see how much it resists. And if you did that for a muscle, you would see this happen. This exponential growth of tension as you stretch it. Okay? So we can use this elastic components, but stretching a muscle gives it strength, but gives it force. All right? A muscle cannot stretch too much, of course, it's going to snap. Okay? That elastic component can store energy. Okay? As a bloke doing a squat jump, as you go down, rapidly and then spring back up. And you store that elastic energy, you sink down. And then you want to rebound, you want to contract your muscles at the same time those springs are rebounding. That's a skill, a timing. Okay? This problem of these elastic components gives us passive insufficiency. Okay? This is when a multi-articular muscle, is it a new term? New term? Some say yes, some say no. Passive insufficiency is basically you can't stretch a muscle across multiple joints at the same time to allow complete range of motion at all those joints at the same time. Multi-articular muscles. This is why it hurts to touch your toes. Because what I'm doing, what hurts your hamstrings, right? When I flex my hip, what happens to the hamstrings? They cross the hip joint, right? Into tuberosity. So as I flex my hip, I'm stretching them. If I keep my knees bent at the same time, I'm also stretching them there. That's why it's hard to touch your toes if you've got short hamstrings. How do I get away with touching my toes if I've got short hamstrings? I bend my knees. I take the slack off, or the tension off, I say. I put slack into the system at the knees, allow me to get more hip range of motion. If somebody's got short hamstrings, it's very hard to get complete range of motion to the hip and the knee at the same time. That's some tests you'll look at hamstring length. You've done this one where you lie on your back and you put your thigh up straight like this and knee bent, right? And then you try and straighten the knee, go ow, 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 ow. And you measure this angle here to see how short the hamstrings are. Okay? So the 90-90 test, is that right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a 90 here, and you crank on the knee and the leg and see if you can straighten it. That's testing the hamstring length in a certain degree. Same with this tenodesis grip here. So if you, because your finger flexors cross here, 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 if I extend my wrist just passively or actively, your fingers naturally flex. It's hard to extend your fingers, right, with your wrist completely extended. So some people with spinal cord injury will use this to grab something. If I haven't got finger flexion strength, like this, I can extend my wrist and lo and behold, my fingers flex passively, sort of thing. And I can grab things to a certain extent by doing that. That's called a tenodesis grip. And Simon will talk about this in spinal cord injury. That is taking advantage of the fact these four finger flexors just cannot stretch that much, and they're going to bend your fingers to do it, to allow you to do this extension. Make sense? All right. So we've got this graph, oops, and we've got this graph. Active component, elastic component. You add them together to get the real muscle. The real situation will look a bit like this. It's not quite active, really. It's not a very good diagram. Because it's a very stylized diagram. So we're looking at the blue line. The blue line is total tension. So elastic component plus contractile component equals total tension. This is what we measure. This is what we use. This is reality. These are two kind of theoretical things. This is what really exists. You can't separate these out very well. But this is not drawn quite accurately because the elastic component has been shown to be stretched at resting length. So really, that line should start about here somewhere and go like that. So here it's shown exactly at resting length is when you, 100% resting length, that's when the elastic component starts to come into play, you stretch it. But it's not, it's slightly less than that, like this. So that means when you algebraically add up the purple and the green line, the blue line should look like this. Okay? My diagram is slightly different from this one. This is based on the research And this shows that the most force you can get out of a muscle in its normal state is about 120, 125% resting length. So if you stretch a muscle a little bit past its resting length and then contract, you actually generate more force at that situation than any other part of the range of motion. So this is your length-tension relationship. It shows a muscle can make more force at certain lengths. As you go towards this stretch level out here, more and more actual force is contributed by the elastic component. The elastic component, of course, that's the contractile component, and that's your total tension. Okay? This is used in we talked about those cams. Remember doing the weight machines? Some places in range of motion it's easy to make force, some places it's hard to make force because of this line, because of that blue line. Okay? So you will, if you put that cam system on in weight machines, it will make it easier and harder deliberately to stress the muscle equally throughout the range of motion. It's very easy to do a pull-up here. I've got a lot of strength here, right? When you're hanging down here, arms stretched, free, that first degree is quite easy to do a pull-up, right? Isn't it? You've done this, right?
Speak for yourself.
But then you get up to here, and now you're going, oh my God, it's that few degrees, I can't get my chin to the bar. Because you're in here. You started off over here, easy. Now you're finishing the exercise down here. So if you were to design a machine that would make the pull equally hard throughout, you'd have some kind of boost here. You'd have something lifting you at this end. So those last few degrees, you know, you have to whatever, some bungee cord or whatever, some cam, make it slightly easier down here. And then you have to stress the muscle equally throughout the training motion. Does that make sense? And that is an important concept to bear in mind as you design exercises in patients. Not much new there, hopefully. A little bit maybe. This other line we're supposed to look at is important to look at, the force velocity curve. Again, it's not the most ideal, best drawing of it in the world, but whatever. So this shows, let me draw it out here again. Let's get more lines here. Rectangle hyperbola here. So this shows the force a muscle can make at various speeds of contraction. On the right hand side, this is shortening. Yeah, shortening velocity. And this is lengthening. What do we call a type of muscle contraction or activation when it shortens? Concentric contraction, right? So this is our concentric contraction. The best term, and we should later in biomechanics, we're trying to get away from calling muscle things contraction. And this over here would be eccentric contraction. Is the muscle contracting then? Contracting implies shortening, isn't it? You contract something, you shrink it. Yes, it's shrinking over here. Is it shrinking over here? No, it's lengthening. So if you want to be more technical or more precise, we try to call it activation. So this is eccentric activation, concentric activation. This is zero velocity here. So this point here would be termed at zero velocity, it is isometric. Iso saying metric length. So here is your isometric on there. Yeah, it is. Read the graph. Well, ask your question. It's very not on the graph. Isometric contraction, zero velocity, in which there is no, well, there's no visible change in the length of the joint. There is, of course, to be able to make a contraction or a force, you have to shrink the muscle in isometric. So even though I'm trying to lift this table, I can't move it. It's too hot, too heavy. The muscle to develop force against that table has to contract. So in isometric contraction, activation, even a quarter, there's actually about a 7% shrinkage in the muscle. That takes up slack in the tendon and makes force on, you know, pushing this wall or whatever it is. If I just stand here leaning against it with no force, I mean, that's not really nice much contraction. But push against it now, I'm making force against it. Okay, and your muscles do shrink a bit to be able to push on something, even though you can't move it. So this shows clearly, as the speed of contraction goes up, as I get faster in my bicep curl, I cannot make as much force. The force you make drops as the muscle contraction speeds up in a concentric activation. Okay? Why? So I can make way more force isometrically than I can concentrically. What happens? Your cross bridges have to, you know, your cross bridges are doing this, right? Grabbing hold of the actin and doing this. They have to be able to wing back, have time to go back and grab a receptor site and then go like this. If that thing is going fast, it's hard to get hold of them, it's hard to get back in time. So imagine a train going by you slowly. And I'm going to reach out and grab a handle or window. And I can grab a window and I go like that with a train. Another one. Now the train's going at 20 miles an hour. No, you know, I missed that one. I put it back quickly. Now it's going 50 miles an hour. I can hardly touch the train. Well, like you're pushing a car. The car's got brakes on it. I can make a lot of force against that back of that car. Now that car, the brakes taken off and I get it going. And it gets going, I can generate less force against it. Now the car's pushing the gear and the person's driving away at 15 miles an hour, 20 miles an hour. How much force can I make against that back of that car? Very little. All energy is basically keeping up the damn thing while I'm actually making any force against it. So as a muscle contracts faster, it cannot make as much force. Okay? Isometrically, way more force. It's easier to make an isometric contraction than a concentric contraction. Okay? And now you get into the eccentric activation phase here, you can make way more force than you can isometrically, than you can concentrically. So, eccentric activation is much easier. You can generate more force. Because now you're pulling apart the cross bridges apart. You're absorbing energy here. Okay? This is producing, as it were. You're actually physically breaking those cross bridges apart as you resist the effort. So as I lower something to the ground. It doesn't have to be maximal. I mean, okay. If let's pretend, contrast isometric and concentric. I'm doing a concentric curl with 10-pound dumbbell curl. Okay? And let's pretend it takes me 100 muscle fibers to do that, with upwards. I've got 10-pound curl, 100 fibers of my bicep to do it. As I lower it down, let me take about a third of them, roughly. A third of them. So if I was measuring the electrical activity of the muscle, and I did a bicep curl up and down, where would I see more activity? We're going to talk about this. We're going to do this. Where would I see the electrical activity in EMG, electromyography, the greatest? Concentric or eccentric? You're much stronger eccentrically, correct? So where would you see more activity? Concentric. Because concentric is easier. Therefore, I'm recruiting less muscle fibers. So when I do my dumbbell curl up, I'm going to see 10 muscle fibers contracting and see 10 units of activity. As I lower it down, how many am I using roughly? About a third of them. So I'm going to see a third of activity coming out. That makes sense? Just because I can make more force eccentrically does not mean when I do a submaximal force, they're going to be, you're going to have more EMG. We'll talk about EMG at the end of today anyway. A bit more clearly perhaps. These are eccentrics. These hurt. Go to the gym and you have to work out why you do lunges. The day you can't walk, right? You go, oh God, what have I done? You know? You walk downhill, you run downhill, you go for a hike and you go downhill, or you're braking. That's eccentric activation. You're breaking those cross bridges. You're causing muscle damage, literally, little minute muscle damage. And that, of course, is stimulus for regrowth, getting stronger. When I worked at Penn State, so I went to the weight room there. The weight room is probably 50 times the size of this building. It's huge. As far as I can see, weight room at Penn State, football team, you know. And on all the machines, most of them anyway, there was 2 foot pedals. Because the guy who was this weight training coach, actually went against things after this, he was a big believer in eccentrics, activations, right? So you can lower way more weight than you can lift up, can't you? So what they would do, for example, they'd work out in partners, and it'd be, let's say, for example, the military press. You know, the military press, you sit on a chair like this and handle, and you go like this, right? The weight stack goes up and down on a point here, right? And what they'll do, the guy working out will do a maximum military press, let's say. His partner will be standing on a frame of the machine. When he gets to the top weight stack, the guy's partner would stand on a weight stack. And the guy would lower him down. And get off, and he would push him up. And then he would stand on it and lower him down. There's no way in hell could he get that bloke up, but he could lower it down. So really, really, really stressing the muscles there. You can make more force concentrically than isometrically than you can concentrically. Let's pretend I can do 100. Well, yeah, let's make it reasonable for me. 100-pound dumbbell curl. Well, let's pretend isometrically I can make 100 pounds with a bar glued to the ground. I can make 100 pounds of force against it. There's no way I can lift that. I can lift at maximum about 80% of that. So if I can actually get off the ground, maybe 80 pounds, I'm lucky. But you can make 100 pounds if it's not moving. Because as soon as it starts moving, you get into this curve. That makes sense. This is very, very, very important to our patients. Because this is much easier than this. If a patient is very, very weak, and often they are, you have to start here or here. Example, I had a guy fairly recently, hip abduction, talk about hip abductions, how important they are important for gait, right? This guy lying in bed could not lift his legs apart. He could not do an abduction of his leg lying sideline. It was just too weak. What I started doing, I'd put my finger in his bottom of his pants and hold it up here. I said, I'll let go, and you can actually lower it down. Lift up. There's no way to lift up, but I can lift up for him, and he could slow it going down. If you do eccentric activation, no way to do isometric or even or concentric. If you do eccentric, you work on eccentric first, and you work, and hopefully you get into here. But we now can do concentric. You'll be surprised how often this comes into play in the patients who are very weak. Don't forget this curve. Okay? We can add one thing to this curve that's not shown on the graph, is the power. Power, you work over time. How much power can a muscle make? If I put that on here, it looks a bit like this. So this would be now power here. The rate of doing work, right? You know what I mean by power. So, for example, okay, let's pretend there's 50 dumbbells over in the corner of the room. My job is to pick them up and move them over there. 50 dumbbells. Big, massive Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of dude goes over there and picks up 8 of them at once and carries them up like 8 and drops them over here and comes up the next, picks half of them up. And he carries them over here, and he drops them over here. He's done so much work in a certain amount of time. He moves those weights over here. you get a bloke, a little skinny dude or whatever, very fast. He goes there and picks up 2, puts more, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. He gets all his weight stack over there before Arnold Schwarzenegger put his weight stack over there. He's got more power. He's faster and smaller, but he's got his work done earlier. So he has a more powerful person than a huge big weightlifter. The weightlifter doesn't have to have the most power. The rate of doing work depends on what you do. So this here shows that the greatest power output from muscle is about 25% of a maximum velocity of shortening. 25%. So you can get the most power from muscle when it's working about a quarter of its maximum speed. Important concept in exercise. This is why you have gears on a bike. You get your bike going in a low gear and you go fast and fast. Next minute your pedals are going like this. What do? You change down a gear so your pedals going slower. But lo and behold, you're actually going faster. You change gear again, you go faster. Okay? Just because your legs are spinning around 90 miles an hour doesn't mean you're going very fast. You get not much, and you want to get your power output, your legs turning around this kind of speed, right? That's when you get the most power out of it. If you combine these two graphs together, you should, this manifold, so when you're looking at a real muscle contraction, you've got to take into account its velocity contraction. You've got to take into account the length of it. And this sort of surface here shows that. Okay? Very important when you're designing exercises for patients. A little bit more on what types of muscle activation. So we know the difference between isometric, concentric, and eccentric, right? People always, for some reason, in therapeutic skills anyway, don't get what eccentric activation is for some reason. Okay. Example. I am doing this, lifting this thing up here. What muscle is involved and what type of activation? I'm coming up. Concentric activation of biceps. As I lower this down, this is eccentric activation of, what are the triceps doing? Probably nothing. Nothing. As I'm lowering this down, the triceps are flabby, they're not concentric contraction. People say that. Oh, I'm putting it down using concentric contraction of the triceps. No. If I have my 12-ounce beer in my can, well, let's pretend I go to a bar in America and I get asked for a nice pint and I get this kind of stuff like water. Bud Light, let's call it. For want of a better term. And I'm expecting a nice ale. And I go, concentric, and I go, look. And I go to the bartender, this is disgusting. And I slam my beer down the table as fast as I can. It sprays everywhere. I do this. What muscle activation? What muscle activation? I have lots of weird things there. Some are right, some are wrong. Eccentric contraction of? No! What is it? Triceps? Concentric. I'm going faster than gravity. I'm accelerating my beer into the bar. If I was genuinely to put the bar, I was nice, but I'm preserving this. I'm going to lower it down to the table like this and go, yeah, thank you, biceps, eccentric. But I'm slamming it down faster than gravity would normally take it down. So I'm whacking it down. Now I'm using triceps, concentric. Biceps would do, maybe come on at the end, just stop me breaking my hand or breaking the glass. But generally they're going to relax on the way down and maybe break. So your eccentric is often the braking action at the end. Biceps are breaking it here. If I want to smash the table, I wouldn't use any biceps. I just smash it. And the biceps don't want to come on, so I want to impart as much force to the glass as possible. get those confused because people do all the time. And they think they're the thing. When you think activation and blah, 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 people go, oh, God, what's going on here? You have long muscle, and they go, which time the joint is working, and all that kind of stuff. It seems fairly simple to me, but, and maybe a lot of you, but some people kind of get mixed up there for some reason. Even late 50s, people are making weird mistakes about eccentric versus concentric. You also hear the term isokinetic. What does that term mean? ISO, same kinetic speed, same speed. So there's various machines out there. We've got one down at Wayne likes to play with. This is Viadex, Viadex here. We have Viadex down in the gym. This looks exactly like that thing. So there's a bar, a lever, you make force against legs, arms, knees, everything, and you can adjust it. So this controls the speed of contraction. You make as much force as you can against it, but you can't move it faster than 10 degrees a second or 100 degrees a second, whatever it is. The reason they have these isokinetic machines is because of this curve. Okay? They want to control the speed of motion because they know a muscle can make more force at different speeds. So if I do a bicep curl, I go slowly and quickly and slowly and quickly, I'm actually taxing it differently throughout the range of motion because I've got different speeds in there. So I want the speed to be constant. Take a part of the graph, that's what I want you to maintain speed. So that's what the machine will do that for you. Isotonic contractions. Those are the ones where the muscle is stressed equally throughout the range of motion. That's where the cam system, or sometimes they have a piston that adjusts as you go, so that the amount of force you generate, or as the muscle works equally hard throughout its range of motion. Because of this curve, they know at certain lengths, muscles can make more force or less force. So I'm going to adjust the cam on the pulley to make the muscles stress equally throughout the range of motion. Is a dumbbell curl isotonic contraction? Most books will say yes. Most books are wrong. At the first blush, you say yes. The weight is the same, therefore the muscle is. If you think about, if you say isotonic is reference to the weight, yes. But really, we're talking about the muscle. Is the muscle working equally throughout the range of motion? No, because the lever arm and all kind of things are changing. The length changes. And I get shorter. As the muscle gets shorter, it makes it harder to do. So that a dumbbell curl is functional, but it's not an isotonic contraction. It should be called isoinertial, because the inertia is always constant. The weight, its mass is always constant. You don't lower the mass, chuck pieces off the mass as you go, or add mass to it. So a dumbbell curl is an isoinertial exercise. Because the inertia of the dumbbell is always the same. It taxes the muscle differently throughout its range of motion though. Does that make sense? All right. How's your time? Was that too slow? Too quick?
You got about what, 35, 40 minutes, something like that.
All right. The shape of a muscle influences the ability to make force. So if you come across this before, exercise physiology. NA, fusiform, types of different muscle shapes, and how they can use different force or not.
Briefly.
Very brief. All right. So we have, as I said, we have various different shaped muscles. Here's lots of them there. Look. Yeah. Quadrilateral muscle. Give me an example of that one there. What would that be? Quickly. Quadrilateral. What muscle looks with shape? Anatomy. Come on.
Coronary quadratus.
Coronary quadratus. Good one. Quadratus lumborum, maybe, yeah. What else? Quadratus femoris. Strap muscle. Long, thin things like this. Sartorius. Good one. Gemelli, maybe. Here's your rectus abdominis. A fusiform is a very spindle shape. Many of our muscles look like this. biceps, whatever, okay? Oh, digastric. Gastric means what? Gaster, belly. So two bellies, and more hyoid, right? Some of your strap muscles in the throat look like this. Tricipital, three heads, triceps, hard one. Triangular or radiate muscle would be, that looks like what? Yeah, trapezoid kind of thing, but it's half the traps. Pec major, looks like that. Cruciate, kind of your intercostals look like that. Unipennate. So pennate means feather. So unipennate is a tendon. See, most of these muscles we talked about so far, the muscle fibers come like this, insert into a tendon here. They insert into the end of a tendon, right? Fusiform, parallel, whatever. They look like this. A pennate muscle has a tendon, and the fibers insert into an angle into it from one side. From one side, it's a unipennate, one feather, half of a feather. If it's bipennate, two sides. If it's multipennate, we have another sort of little arrangement of all kinds of stuff coming on like this. Multiple directions coming in here. Multipennate. So unipennate, a good example would be what muscle looks like that? Lower leg. Classic example coming off the fibula. Extensor digitorum longus. Goes all the way down like that. Bipennate, rectus femoris. Multipennate, deltoid, soleus, spiral. That's the pec major, but that's more like the pec major, because they just cut over there. Radial muscles in the eye, there. So anyway, you've got these various shapes of muscle. And depending on the shape of the muscle, they can produce less or more force and less or more range of motion. Let's look at this. So here's just an example of actually put that up before. Kathy made this beautiful slide.
I love that
Unipennate, bipennate, multipennate. Yeah, bipennate, biceps, femoris, whatever. So lots of different shapes of these muscles. Now the key thing to remember is this diagram here. When you have a pennate muscle, the muscle inserts the angle into the tendon, but you get a greater cross-sectional area of muscle fiber. So a greater cross-sectional muscle fiber in pennate muscles. That gives you more force. All other things being equal, a pennate muscle is going to be stronger than a fusiform muscle. Okay? What's the disadvantage of having a pennate muscle? What you lose, you gain strength of pennate muscle, but what you lose? All right, imagine I'm going to make a pennate muscle. Oh, well, let's look at a fusiform muscle first. Here is a car and a rope, and some bloke is standing here, and he's going to pull on that. This is a fusiform muscle. All right? Tendon, muscle in a straight line. If I pull this rope 5 yards, if I walk backwards 5 yards, how far does the car go if I can pull it? 5 yards. Right? Good range of motion. Now let's put these blokes standing here. They can't move, and they both have to pull on the central rope. They pull as hard as they possibly can. How far will the car go? As far as distance when those two ropes are straight, aren't they? They can't go any further than that distance, a couple of yards. The more acute they are, the further they'll go. Imagine these two guys are standing exactly opposite each other, and the ropes are going straight across the front, across the rope. They pull as hard as they possibly can. How far does the car go? Nowhere. Okay? So you lose range of motion with pennate muscles. You gain strength, you gain force. And that's what that says, probably. Yes, it says that. One thing you also gain with pennate muscles is because you have motor units, so I know what a motor unit is, I can recruit different parts of the muscle. So if let's go back to the bloke standing here, and he pulls, which direction does the car go? That way. No other way. These two blokes here, they contract equally. Which way did the muscle go? The car that way. However, if the nervous system decides to not to recruit this bloke's power, only pull from here, which way did the car go? This way. So you can recruit different parts of the muscle and get different actions out of the muscle by depending on which part you decide to recruit. Like, for example, our deltoid. Very good example, very gross example. You've got your anterior, middle, and your posterior. You get different actions of that same muscle depending on which part of the muscle you recruit with the nervous system. So you get flexibility of direction with a pennate muscle. You can't get with the biceps. The biceps just does this. Supination as well, whatever. It just does that. You can't pull any weird direction as you can with a pennate muscle. Okay. Just review this. So I think we can talk about that. Yeah, sure. So the pennate muscle is shorter fibers, but there's more of them in there. Fitting into a given area. So you've got more of these blokes over here, you get cram them in, and you get more force. Okay? Some other things, briefly. We talked about before about the influence of muscle force production. The moment arm, where you decide to insert the tendon is going to have an impact on how much force it can produce, of course. So this is the biceps. If you insert it further away from the joint than it is now, you'd be able to get more force because the lever arm is longer. You would, of course, lose what? You'd lose range of motion. So the moment arm a muscle has will influence both its range of motion and its ability to produce force at the end of lifting the weight or less weight or whatever. So the moment arm is important to get comfortable. The muscle fiber, you must have done this exercise here, right? It's very common, you must have done this. So very quickly, hyper muscle fiber, slow twitch, the intermediate one, a fast twitch, but fatigue resistant, and you've got fast twitch and fatigue. You've got these three, I mean, there's almost a continually sort of thing, some respect. This is a very simplified version of these muscle fiber types. Some can produce a lot of force, get tired, some produce little force, but can produce that little force for long periods of time. And depending on what muscle you're looking at, so different muscles have a different percentage of these fibers within them. And their function will be dependent on those, or vice versa. But, if you want a postural muscle, you want to maintain low level force for a long period of time, you're going to stick a lot of slow twitch fibers in there. Like your soleus, for example. And your soleus, I'm sitting here getting bored, falling asleep all day long. It's the soleus that keeps plantar flexing and pulling back over my feet all day long. So it's not going to get a huge amount of power. Your gas drop is going to be a sprinting muscle, going to get going. You push like forward, jump off the ground. If your gas drop's going to do that for you, really get some force involved in it. And unfortunately, as we age, type 2 is going to reduce. Okay? So your ability to make massive, quick generation of force, unfortunately, is reduced with age. And we talk about this weighing a lot in patho,
I'll talk about some of that.
and
Jerry, yeah, talk about
geriatrics. We talk
geriatrics.
about changing muscle composition as you age, and you have to fight that. So here's a summary of those three basic types: FOG, SO, and FG. That those labels based on scale in which you are tested muscle. I remember in my undergrad we got these rats, and we had to cut the rat plantaris muscle. You know where the plantaris is? Where is it? In the calf. Yeah, exactly right. Like the muscle about that long, right, and the tendon's that long. And it's basically for us, it's very useless, right? It doesn't make much force, except we use it for what? What do we use a plantaris for? Plantar flexion, but who else uses it? We chop it out, right, and move it somewhere else. You harvest it. It's a very good muscle to harvest for tendon transplants. Beautiful long tendon, you don't really need it. It hurts like heck when you rip it though, apparently. And you come and cut that and stick it in a person's forearm. But we did this experiment on a rat. We did a rat plantaris, and lo and behold, we found it stained it a lot of fast twitch fiber, very, very fast twitch fiber muscle. Because rats have a big plantar, they sprint on it. That's a major plantar flexor in rats. A bit of trivia for you. And so I just remember slicing this stupid rat muscle up and looking at a microscope and staying and counting every bloody muscle cell. Is that a slow twitch? Is that a fast twitch? And you have to go with percentage of fast twitch and slow twitch. Oh, wonderful. Well, anyway, interesting, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, the amount of twitch tension, the amount of how rapid a muscle can make force and how long it can make force will depend on the fiber composition of the muscle. It's common sense. Certain, remember when we make a force, when we generate force in the muscle, two things we can do to make force, increase force. We can recruit more motor units, and we can, what else? There's two things you do to make, so I'm going to gradually lift this weight, and I'm holding a picture, empty pitcher, and I put a pint of beer in it. I add more muscle fibers somehow, right? And then I put a lot of more, and more, and more, and more weight goes on and on and on. I'm just trying to hold this thing steady. So I'm having to make more force as more stuff gets poured into the pitcher, whatever it is. So one thing I can do is add more motor units. That's more muscle fibers, right? So that's going to make more force. That's known as spatial summation, spatial recruitment. Okay? Remember, each motor unit, what's the definition of a motor unit? Is up there? Yeah, of course. 1.5 motor neuron and all the muscle fibers it recruits. That is the smallest functional unit of muscle contraction. I cannot recruit individual muscle fibers. I don't recruit the whole biceps as one. It's not all, biceps not all on or off. We can change the amount of force within it by recruiting these motor units within it. Muscles have thousands and often hundreds of thousands sometimes of motor units within them. So there's 2,000. Okay? 2,000, and the number of fibers per muscle, per motor unit varies across the body. In a gross, ugly muscle, like the quads, like the gastroc, like the soleus, you have one alpha motor neuron and hundreds and hundreds, maybe 1,000 of muscle fibers. Gross control. When I turn this motor unit on, all these 1,000 will contract maximum they possibly can. A motor unit will contract maximally or not at all. And the number of those motor units we're contracting maximally within a muscle determines how much force that muscle makes. So I recruit 10 motor units, 50 motor units, 1,000 motor units, 2 motor units, etc. So that is how you graduate force, modulate force. The number of motor units within that muscle that are firing max at any given time. Okay? Where do you think the lowest ratio is in terms of, let's say, 1 to 10,000, 1 to 1,000 in a gastroc or soleus or quads? What muscle has, let's say, 1 to 10, 1 to 30, 1 to 20, something like that? what muscles do you need the finest control over? The most precise, accurate control. Where? Fingers, not bad. There's something that's way more important than that. The eyeball, the eyes, the finger muscles of the eye, the rectus muscles, oblique muscles of the eye. I move that eye really minutely. Control is very, very important. Precisely move my eye in various positions. That 1 to 10 maybe there. One motor unit, 10 fibers. So you can control that muscle very, very carefully, very minutely. Okay, what's the other thing? Now, this is number of motor units. What else do we recruit? How else do we make more force? We recruit the muscle at a faster rate. Temporal summation, temporal recruitment. So let's look at a twitch tension of the muscle fiber. So I recruit a muscle and it makes force, boom, relaxes. All right, I fire it again. Boom, same amount of force. That's a twitch tension. That's a motor unit, it's fine. Boom, that's its force level. Okay, now I let you double that recruitment rate. It's very slow. No increasing force. But now if I go even faster, I fire in here. What happens before this muscle is relaxing, all the elasticity goes back, I fire it. And I get the summation of force. If I get this tetanus, the unfused tetanus here. So I've now increased this force because I've not allowed that elasticity to come back to normal, as it were. The extra force is going into making force to bone. That makes sense. So when you tend to recruit it faster, it can make more force. So you add more motor units and you fire them faster. Okay. But the type of it, temporal summation, there we go. Now it depends on the size, the way you use either temporal or spatial recruitment. So it depends a bit on the size of the muscle you're looking at. For example, larger muscles, like the quad, let's say, they will use more summation of spatial summation, more motor units. Okay, so they will, as you go, let's say, go from 10% to 50% to 80%, and you're going to go from 80% to 100%. What you're going to do, you're going to grab more motor units in a large quads. But in a small muscle like my little finger muscle, then I have used all those motor units up by about 50, 60, 70%, 50% of muscle contraction. Now to get from 50 to 100, I fire those faster. Muscles use different strategies, as it were, to modulate force production. Small muscles use temporal summation more, larger muscles use spatial summation. It's a general principle. All right. We'll talk about a lot more about going over the muscle spindles in motor control, in your quiz anyway. But of course, the producer of muscle force is the nerve. I mean, the nerve system, the motor control is more important than anything else. That's my advice. The nervous system controls everything. So you've got to take into account the nervous system, how the nervous system learns. Remember, you can go, when I go down to the weight room tomorrow, and we'll go to a weight room and we do a maximum bench press, and it's 100 pounds. You're going to work out for 2 weeks, doing 100 pounds or doing a maximum bench press every week, every day, 5 days a week, 2 weeks. In 2 weeks' time, do you think I can do more than 100 pound bench press? I've been working out hard for 2 weeks, on day one, my maximum is 100 pounds. Intuitive training doing a bench press, can I do more than 100 pounds? Of course you can. Oh, lots more. Tons more force than 100 pounds after 2 weeks. Why? Did I make any more muscle fibers? Did my muscles hypertrophy in 2 weeks? Of course I did. About 6 to 8 weeks before you get any kind of physical change in the muscle. So how did I produce it? Now I'm doing 150 pounds after 2 weeks of training. How can I do that? Motor learning, it's the nervous system. The nervous system gives you most of those early changes in force production. If you go into your patient in home health, teach them to do heel raises. They can make 2 on first day, and you tell them to do it twice a day. 3 days later, they're doing 50 of the things. Is that because they got any stronger physically in terms of muscle? No, it's the nervous system doing it for you. The nervous system drives motor learning.
Is it just more efficient? Is that what it?
You recruit more motor units, you're recruiting the correct motor units at the right time. If the spinal cord learns, it's a facilitation of neural circuits. We'll talk about motor control, but yeah, the nervous system is learning to do the task, recruit the muscle better. In muscles, we have muscle spindles. Do you know much about these things, Jigs? You know what? We'll bore you to tears in motor control and then neurophysics doing these. We spent a week talking about this thing. Have you done this in any class? So what do muscle spindles do? What's their job? They sense stretch, length, and speed of stretch. Because a long story short, if I talk an hour about on this, but a muscle spindle is a length-sensitive receptor that sits within the muscle, and it does not like to be stretched. If you stretch a muscle spindle, it will cause the muscle it lies within to contract. We use that in PT. That principle. When I whack somebody's patella tendon, it's not the Golgi tendon organ. There's nothing in the tendon relevant. When I whack a patella tendon, it minutely tugs on the quads muscles. And this slightly gives a little stretch. Within that quads are those muscle spindles. They tell the spinal cord, long story short, to send a signal down the alpha motor neurons to contract the quads and motor or your legs kicks up. That's basically my 2 cents worth of muscle spindle, rather than a 2-hour version.
More to come.
More to come. So basically, muscle spindles, when you stretch a muscle, it will resist you. The faster you stretch a muscle, the faster, harder it resists you. That principle is very, very important in what patient population. If I get somebody's muscle, a patient, and I do this to it, it goes nice up and stretched. If I do this to it, it goes like that. That's the right? The stroke patients. Patient with stroke. The faster you stretch a muscle, the more it resists. That is this fellow's job here, unfortunately. You will have to deal with this thing many times in your patient with stroke. That's the stage. Other people with upper motor neuron lesions. Have you heard that term? Upper motor neuron? Put in your brain for now, we'll come back to that. Upper motor neuron lesions give you spasticity, which is this thing going crazy. And motor control, we talk for hours about why that is. The opposite of that kind of thing, very crudely, is this idea, the Golgi tendon organ. This sits in your tendon, or the junction between the tendon and the muscle. This, if you stretch it, it detects force, not stretch, it's force. The force going to the tendon. Those dendrites are squeezed by those collagen fibrils as the tendon gets stretched, gets force put on. The more force you put on the GTO, the more it signals to the nervous system, and what does that do? It turns the muscle off. The job of this thing detects force, and at high force it will shut the muscle down. The opposite of the muscle symbol. This is the guy who's a world record, deadlift. He slaps himself across the face. He's shouting. He's taking smelling salts. He's hyped up. He comes up to the bar and he just gives. He drops it, and his muscles give it a head. You're about to break me. Let go. And before you break your bones, the muscle rips, you drop the muscle, you drop the bar on the floor. That's your GTOs shutting yourself off. These are inhibitory influence on muscle force. Some of the motor learning thought, as you get stronger, you actually inhibit these inhibitors. If I could turn the inhibitory influence on my body tendons off, I could be stronger. Okay? I was going to talk about EMG, I'm not going to get EMG on. All right, so immobilization, basically like aging sort of thing. As you put an arm, you're going to be dealing with this. Put somebody's arm in a cast, put a leg in a cast, they come out, now they've got therapy. What's the problem here? Slow twitch, the subject more just used to fast twitch, you're going to be weaker, you're going to have increased connective tissue, you're going to have muscle atrophy. Use it or lose it, right? If you don't use a muscle, you're going to lose it. The patient's going to be very weak. The bone's going to be weak as well in certain cases. You lose strength, in that position it's shortened. You have muscle contractions. If the muscle might not be able to generate any force because it's stuck in that position. The range of motion will be reduced. So you have to have this rehabilitation. Only need 30 minutes to get that range of motion. You've got to keep that arm going through that range of motion during the immobilized period as you can. With aging, you lose muscle fibers, loss of muscle fibers, and you decrease primarily early on in your fast twitch fibers. So the ability to make force rapidly is going to decrease. That's my little shirt. And of course, you get increased disease. Some diseases you'll talk about in pathology will also do this. Certain diseases will change the amount of connective tissue. Cerebral palsy, for example. My last little. It's a classic sign. 40-year-old triathlete, it's a cross section of the quads, right? The bone in the middle and the muscle will meet around the outside. This is a 74-year-old couch potato in the middle. Right? Watching telly all day long. You do not have to do end up like that. The muscle on the bottom is a 70-year-old triathlete who runs work out. Look at the difference between the middle and the bottom graph in the picture. This is not necessary. You don't have. This is not predestined. If you sit on your couch, your muscles end up like this. If you run, your muscles end up like this.
We talk about that more in geriatrics.
Yeah.
More to come.
More to come. There's a lot more to come in all this. And I did not. I touched the surface on also. I didn't talk about EMG.
We got the lab. You have 5 minutes?
5 minutes. Key point. EMG measures the electrical activity of a muscle. It does not measure the strength of a muscle. It measures how hard it's working. Okay? And we can do that on muscle, and we'll do it in the lab, but I'd say a big money. Here's a question though. You're not allowed to leave until you get the answer right. I am going to do a squat down and up. I'm measuring quadriceps muscle EMG. Quadriceps EMG. And I see this pattern, and we can do this, we'll do this in lab. Try not to electrocute anybody. I've only done it a couple of times. And I see this activation pattern. A, B, etc. Which of those is going down, concentric? No, so eccentric. So as I go squat down, right, the quad's activated which way? Eccentric, right? And coming up, concentric. Which of those is concentric? Which of those is eccentric? And we're here until everybody gets agrees on this. More activation A, correct? Obviously. Yeah, all agree. B, less activation. Which one is the spotting the going down? B or A? Somebody can leave. B. Okay? B, because I'm using less muscle fibers, it's easier. When I push up, I see more energy. Last question. If I were to do a maximal isometric contraction, a concentric contraction with my biceps, I can lift, let's say, 100 pounds, I can lower 200 pounds down. Where would I see more energy? I'm doing maximally up and maximally down. Maximally up and maximally down. I'm reducing more force going down because I'm doing maximum, right? Some machines making me whatever, like this one. Where do you see more energy? Maximally up and maximally down. Where do you see it? You can't leave. The same.
Okay, before you guys go, wait.